Ladies, I want you to lean in. Tonight, we're not here for cute talk. We're not here for surface level advice. We're here for the truth, the kind of truth that shakes you to your core, that makes you sit up straight, that makes you remember exactly who you are. Because too many of you have been carrying pain in silence. Not the good silence, the healing kind, but the silence that comes when you're screaming on the inside and nobody hears you. You've begged to be seen. You've explained yourself until your throat was raw. You've poured your soul out for a man who gave you crumbs when you deserved the feast. And somewhere along the way, you started to believe you had to talk louder, cry harder, fight longer just to be loved. But let me tell you something tonight. You don't need to talk louder. You don't need to fight harder. You don't need to beg. What you need is silence. Not silence as punishment, but silence as power. Silence that speaks louder than words. Silence that heals you from the inside out. Silence that makes him realize you are not a convenience. You are the prize. Tonight, I'm going to give you 6 rules. 6 silence rules that will flip the script in your life and in your relationships. 6 rules that will remind you of your worth, reset the standard, and make any man who ever thought he could play you realize he's dealing with a woman who cannot be replaced. So sit up, breathe deep, and prepare yourself, because once you understand the power of silence, you'll never move the same again. Rule 1, silence is a mirror, ladies. I want you to sit with this thought for a moment. Silence is not emptiness, it's not weakness, and it's not absence. Silence is a mirror. And what does a mirror do? It reflects, it reveals what is already there. It doesn't create, it doesn't manipulate. It simply shows the truth. And that's exactly what silence does in your relationship. When you stop calling, when you stop sending those long messages, trying to explain yourself, when you stop showing up just to prove you love him more than he loves you, silence begins to reflect the reality of where that man stands. If your silence pushes him away, then guess what? He was already gone. He was just hanging around because you were holding the rope. The moment you let go, the reflection comes clear. He wasn't tied to you. He was tied to the comfort you gave him. But if your silence draws him closer, if your absence makes him restless, if he suddenly notices the quiet where your voice used to be, that's the reflection of a man who truly values you. Silence is your test without words. It's your X-ray machine. It shows you the fractures, the hidden weaknesses, the truth beneath the smile and the smooth words. You don't need to ask, do you care about me? You don't need to beg. Your silence will answer that question faster and clearer than his mouth ever will. See, some of y'all are stuck in cycles of arguing and explaining. You're fighting with a man who already knows what he's doing. You're begging for him to see you, when deep down you know he sees you. He just ain't acting right because he doesn't fear losing you. But when you step into silence, you remove the noise. You remove the excuses. You remove the clutter. And what's left? The raw truth. Ladies, silence is like turning off the music in a crowded room. At first, it feels uncomfortable. It feels awkward because you're used to filling that space with noise. Noise of your pleas, your arguments, your chasing. But then you start to notice who can handle the quiet and who can't. You start to see who fidgets, who walks away, who can't stand the reflection of himself when you ain't there to buffer it with your energy. That's the mirror. That's silence doing the work for you. Now let me break it down in real talk. A man who loves you, who's invested in you, who knows your value. When you go silent, he doesn't sit comfortably in that space. He feels the absence. He feels the gap. Your silence becomes a weight pressing on him, reminding him that something ain't right, reminding him that his actions or his lack of action caused that quiet. That's when he wakes up. That's when he starts reflecting on himself. That's when he realizes, man, I could lose her. But on the flip side, silence will expose a man who was never for you in the first place. If you stop talking and weeks go by, months go by, and he never reaches out, never checks in, never feels your absence, That's not silence failing you. That's silence freeing you. Because the mirror is telling you he was never yours. You were carrying the whole thing. And ladies, let me tell you something boldy. Sometimes we don't want to look in the mirror. Sometimes we'd rather live in the noise because the truth is painful. It's easier to keep talking, to keep trying, to keep convincing ourselves that if we just say it the right way, he'll understand. But silence doesn't lie. Silence doesn't sugarcoat. Silence shows you what's real. That's why it's so powerful. That's why it's so necessary. Because you don't need another argument. You don't need another sleepless night rehearsing what you'll say. You don't need another text message that gets ignored. What you need is the reflection that comes when you stop, when you breathe, when you let the quiet do the talking. And here's the beauty: silence doesn't just show you who he is, it shows you who you are. Because in that quiet, you start to see how strong you are. You start to see how much you've been giving away. You start to see that your worth was never tied to his recognition of it. Silence becomes your mirror too. It shows you the woman who's been hiding behind the noise. It shows you the woman who's capable of walking away, the woman who's worthy of more, the woman who doesn't need to beg to be loved. So the next time you feel that urge to keep talking, to keep chasing, to keep explaining yourself into exhaustion, I want you to remember this: silence is your mirror. It's not weakness. It's not surrender. It's revelation. And when you're brave enough to look at the reflection, you'll know exactly where you stand and exactly what you deserve. Rule 828. Silence is power, not punishment, ladies. Let's get this straight from the beginning. Silence is not about playing games. This is not about being petty. It's not about trying to manipulate. And it's not about sitting there with your arms crossed waiting for him to beg. That's not silence. That's punishment. And when you use silence as punishment, you're still operating from a place of weakness. You're still trying to control him with your emotions. That's not what we're doing here. I'm telling you today that silence is power. Real, undeniable, unshakable power. And when you learn how to use it, everything shifts. See, silence's power is not about him. It's about you. It's about deciding that you no longer need to waste your breath on conversations that go in circles. It's about understanding that every time you argue, every time you beg, every time you plead for him to understand, you're giving away energy. You're leaking your strength into a void that will never fill you back up. But when you choose silence, you're not withholding. You're reclaiming. You're saying, I will not lower my voice, my dignity, or my peace just to make you hear me. That is power. Now, men don't admit this out loud, but let me tell you something: silence shakes them. Oh, they'll act like they don't notice. They'll act like it doesn't bother them. But deep inside, silence is loud. It echoes in their mind because men are wired to fix things, to chase things, to conquer things. And when you go quiet, suddenly they don't have anything to push against. There's no argument to win, no tears to dismiss, no explanation to dodge. They're left alone with their thoughts. And trust me, that drives them crazy. Think about it. When you're arguing with a man, he tunes you out. He hears the sound of your voice, but he ain't listening. He's either waiting for you to finish so he can say what he wants, or he's already planning his escape. But when you stop talking, when your words vanish from the space, he hears something he can't ignore. The silence, that silence becomes a question mark. It makes him wonder, why isn't she talking? Why isn't she fighting me? Did she give up on me? Did she stop caring? And that's when the fear creeps in. That's when the reflection begins. Ladies, silence is not passive. It's not you sitting in a corner rocking yourself to sleep. No, silence is active. Silence is intentional. Silence is strategy. It's like pulling the plug on a machine that keeps running. Suddenly, the noise stops and everyone in the room notices. Your silence forces him to sit in the reality of his own actions. It forces him to feel the weight of your absence. It forces him to confront the possibility of losing you. Now, let me give you an example. Imagine a man who constantly disrespects your boundaries. You tell him, I don't like when you do that. He ignores it. You explain again. He ignores it. You argue, you cry, you lay out all your reasons, and nothing changes. Why? Because he knows that no matter how loud you get, you'll still be there when the dust settles. But what happens when you stop talking? What happens when you stop reminding him? Suddenly, the script flips. Suddenly, he's not comfortable anymore. Suddenly, he realizes he's standing in silence, and silence feels like distance. Silence feels like loss. That's when it hits him. And let me tell you, ladies, men don't panic when you're mad. They panic when you're calm. They panic when you're silent. Because anger means you still care. Anger means you're still invested. Anger means you're still fighting. But silence is different. Silence means you've decided not to waste energy anymore. Silence means you've stepped back into yourself. Silence means you've taken back the power he thought he had. Silence also forces you to grow. Because in those quiet moments, you stop focusing on him and start focusing on you. You realize how much energy you've poured out trying to make someone treat you right. You see how many times you've bent yourself to fit his comfort. And you begin to ask, why am I doing all the talking when the problem ain't mine? That realization is power. That's you shifting from victim to victor. That's you reclaiming your voice by choosing not to use it. So when I say silence is power, understand me clearly. I don't mean the silent treatment. I don't mean slamming doors, rolling your eyes, and refusing to speak because you want him to chase you. That's not power. That's immaturity. I'm talking about silence that comes from confidence. Silence that comes from knowing your worth. Silence that comes from realizing that sometimes the loudest statement you can make is no statement at all. Ladies, silence is power because it's not about controlling him. It's about controlling you. It's about showing up in your strength, not your weakness. It's about preserving your dignity and peace while forcing the truth to rise to the surface. And once you grasp that, once you sit in that silence, not as punishment, but as power, you'll realize you never lost anything by going quiet. You gained everything. Rule A3. Silence heals what noise can't, ladies. There are wounds inside of you that words will never touch. There are scars in your heart that no amount of talking, explaining, or pleading will ever mend. You've tried it. You've tried pouring your pain into long conversations, into texts at 2 a.m., into arguments that leave you exhausted. And yet, after all the noise, after all the words, you still feel empty. You still feel unseen. You still feel broken. That's because some healing doesn't come from noise. Some healing can only come from silence. Silence is like medicine for the soul. Think about it. When a doctor sets a broken bone, the first thing they do is stop you from moving it. They put in a cast. They make you rest it. Why? Because constant movement won't allow the bone to heal. And that's what happens when you keep talking, keep arguing, keep trying to force a man to see your worth. You're moving the wound. You're reopening it every time. But when you go silent, you finally let the cast do its work. You finally give yourself a chance to heal. You see, healing isn't always about closure from him. Healing isn't always about the apology you never got, the explanation you've been waiting for, or the conversation you keep replaying in your head. Healing is about pulling your energy inward and letting silence wrap around you like a blanket. It's about realizing that your heart needs quiet to repair itself. It's about allowing the tears to fall in private without rushing to explain them. It's about giving yourself permission to stop performing for someone else's love and to start resting in your own. Ladies, sometimes you can't hear God's voice, your own intuition, or even your common sense because you're drowning in the noise. Noise of his excuses, noise of your overthinking, noise of everyone else's opinions. But silence clears the fog. Silence brings clarity. Silence gives you the space to actually feel what you've been running from. That's where the healing begins. And I know silence can feel uncomfortable at first. It feels like abandonment. It feels like emptiness. You want to fill it with something. Music, conversations, distractions, even drama, because sitting with silence forces you to face yourself. But that discomfort is where the healing starts. Because healing ain't supposed to be comfortable. Healing is supposed to break you open so you can put yourself back together stronger. Think about the last time you were in real pain from a relationship. You probably tried to talk it out, right? You tried to get him to understand. You tried to make him see what he was doing. But did it fix anything, or did it just wear you down more? Now imagine if, instead of trying to be heard, you had chosen silence. Imagine if you had stepped back, closed your mouth, and let your heart breathe. That silence would have been your sanctuary. That silence would have been your safe place to process, to cry, to pray, to rebuild. Silence heals because it forces you to stop seeking validation outside of yourself. It makes you stop waiting for him to confirm what you already know, that you deserve better. And once you stop waiting on his words, you start listening to your own. You start hearing the whisper that says, I am worthy. I am enough. I don't need to beg for love. I don't need to chase what's not mine. That's the sound of healing, and it only comes when the noise dies down. And here's the truth. Ladies, men notice when a woman heals in silence. They notice when you stop reacting, when you stop begging, when you stop chasing. At first, they think you're mad. Then they realize you're not mad, you're done. And that realization shakes them. Because a healed woman is powerful. A healed woman doesn't cling. A healed woman doesn't beg. A healed woman knows her worth so deeply that she would rather be alone in peace than together in chaos. But the healing has to start with you choosing silence, with you saying, I don't have to explain myself anymore. I don't have to keep proving my pain to someone who refuses to see it. I don't have to use my words like bandages on someone else's wounds while I'm bleeding out. Silence becomes your hospital. It becomes the place where your spirit lies down, rests, and recovers. So yes, silence can feel lonely. Yes, silence can hurt. But that hurt is different. It's the hurt of a wound finally closing. It's the sting of stitches pulling skin back together. It's the ache of muscles that are regaining strength. And once you come through it, once you've let silence do its work, you emerge stronger. You emerge clearer. You emerge untouchable. Silence heals what noise can't, because silence gives you back yourself. And once you have yourself back, no man, no relationship, no heartbreak can ever take that from you again. Rule 4, silence redefines the standard, ladies. Let me tell you something plain. The standard you live by is the standard you set. And when you choose silence in the face of disrespect, neglect, or indifference, you are doing more than just walking away from the noise. You are redrawing the line of what is and isn't acceptable in your life. Silence redefines the standard because it communicates without words that you will no longer participate in anything that dishonors you. It shifts the balance of power, and it does so without you ever raising your voice. See, for too long, some of you have been using words to set your standards. You've said things like, I don't like when you talk to me like that. You've begged, please don't ignore my needs. You've argued, I deserve more effort, more respect, more love. But here's the truth. When your actions don't match your words, when you keep talking but keep staying, the standard doesn't change. Because words without boundaries are just noise. And men, they'll hear the words, but they respond to the action. They respond to what you do far more than what you say. That's where silence comes in. Silence is not passive, it's powerful. Silence is the action that says, I will not continue to entertain this. It is the quiet decision that resets the tone of the relationship. Because when you go silent, you stop reinforcing bad behavior with your energy. You stop rewarding his neglect with your presence. You stop allowing your time, your attention, your love to be taken for granted. And that, ladies, is a new standard. Think about it like this. Imagine a man who comes home late night after night, and you keep arguing. Every time he walks through that door, you're waiting with a lecture. You're furious, and rightfully so. But what does he hear? He hears noise. He hears something that he's gotten used to ignoring. But one day you don't say a word. You don't nag. You don't cry. You don't plead. You go quiet. Suddenly, he feels something shift. The house is cold. The energy is different. And the silence is screaming louder than any words you ever spoke. That's the moment he realizes the standard has changed. Because silence does something that words never could. It forces him to confront the weight of losing you. It forces him to sit in the emptiness that your energy used to fill. And that silence tells him, I will not live at this level anymore. If you can't rise to meet me, then you can watch me walk away. But here's the most powerful part. Silence doesn't just redefine the standard for him. It redefines it for you. Because when you choose silence instead of begging, you're teaching yourself what you're willing to tolerate. You're affirming to yourself that peace is more valuable than chaos. You're reminding yourself that respect feels better than validation. And every time you sit in silence, instead of lowering yourself to fight for crumbs, you're raising your own standard. You're telling yourself, I deserve better than this. Ladies, the standard is not what you say, it's what you enforce. And silence enforces better than any speech could. Because silence doesn't bend. Silence doesn't waver. Silence doesn't get emotional and take back what it declared. Silence is steady. Silence is unshakable. Silence is firm. And that firmness is what redefines everything about how you are treated. Now let me be real with you. Not every man will rise to meet the standard. Some will fall away. Some will vanish into the background the moment you go silent, because your silence shows them that the free ride is over. And you know what? That's a blessing, because your silence has just filtered out who was never worthy in the first place. You don't need to argue. You don't need to fight. You don't need to explain. You simply go quiet and the truth reveals itself. And for the men who do rise, silence becomes the wake-up call. It's the alarm clock that says, you are about to lose her if you don't level up. It's the unspoken standard that tells him you will not settle for less than respect, love, and effort. And that's when he changes, not because you nag, but because your silence spoke the language he couldn't ignore. So ladies, when you embrace silence as your standard, you're not playing games. You're not withholding out of spite. You are choosing dignity over drama. You are choosing peace over chaos. You are choosing to show him, and more importantly, yourself, that you are not available at the discount rack. You are full price. You are premium. You are the prize. Silence redefines the standard because it removes negotiation. It takes the power out of his hands and puts it back into yours. And once you realize that, once you choose silence not as punishment, but as the new baseline of your worth, everything about the way you're treated changes. Because a woman who knows her silence is powerful as a woman who will never again settle for less than what she deserves. Rule number 50, silence creates mystery, ladies. Let me tell you one undeniable truth about men. They are drawn to what they don't fully understand. Curiosity fuels their pursuit, and mystery keeps their attention. The moment a man thinks he has you figured out, the chase dies down. He gets comfortable, he gets predictable, and he stops working for what he once fought so hard to win. That's why silence is such a powerful tool. It creates mystery. It pulls you out of the predictable script he's come to rely on and places you back in the position of power. Silence turns you from something ordinary into something intriguing, something he can't stop thinking about. See, when you respond to every call, answer every text within seconds, explain every feeling, and chase every time he pulls away, you become an open book. He doesn't have to wonder. He doesn't have to guess. He knows exactly what you're thinking, exactly how you'll react, and exactly how to play you when it benefits him. But when you go silent, suddenly the script changes. Suddenly he doesn't know. Suddenly the predictable becomes uncertain. And men, they don't like uncertainty. It rattles them. It makes them restless. And that restlessness is where the addiction begins. Imagine this: a man upsets you, and instead of blowing up his phone, instead of sending long texts about how you feel, instead of crying and begging for him to acknowledge your pain, you go quiet. Hours pass, maybe days. He checks his phone, expecting the usual. Nothing. He looks for a reaction, still nothing. He scrolls through social media, waiting to see if you're throwing shade or posting clues. Silence. And that silence becomes louder than anything you could have said. It makes him wonder. It makes him second guess. It makes him realize he doesn't know what's going on in your head. And that mystery drives him crazy. See, ladies, men are natural problem solvers. They like puzzles. They like challenges. They like figuring things out. And when you go silent, you become the puzzle. You become the challenge. You become the thing he can't solve, the mystery he can't shake, the thought that keeps him awake at night. That's when the addiction forms. Not because you begged, not because you argued, but because your silence made you unpredictable. Silence also gives you the space to cultivate real mystery. Because mystery isn't just about withholding, it's about transforming. While he's wondering where you are, you're leveling up. While he's waiting for your reaction, you're pouring into yourself. You're getting stronger, happier, more radiant. So when he finally does see you again, you're not the same woman he thought he knew. You're glowing with self-respect. You're standing taller. You're exuding peace and power. And that transformation, combined with the silence that hits him like a shockwave. He realizes he has to chase again because you've become new, and new is irresistible. Now, let's be real. Some men will act like they don't care about your silence. They'll pretend like they don't notice. They'll act unfazed. But don't be fooled. Silence creeps into their thoughts when they least expect it. He'll be out with his friends, laughing, but wondering why you haven't texted. He'll be lying in bed, scrolling through his phone, but still checking to see if your name pops up. Silence plants seeds of curiosity, and curiosity grows into obsession. And here's the part I want you to hear loud and clear. Mystery is not about manipulation. It's not about playing games. It's about valuing yourself enough to not be an open book to someone who hasn't earned the right to read every page. It's about protecting your peace, your energy, your time, and allowing a man to experience what it feels like when he doesn't have constant access to you. That's not punishment, that's power. Ladies, when a man doesn't know where he stands with you, he works harder to find out. When he's not sure what you're thinking, he pays more attention. When he doesn't have guaranteed access to your time, he values every moment he gets. That's the beauty of silence. It creates scarcity, and scarcity creates value. A diamond is precious because it's rare, not because it's everywhere. And your silence reminds him that you are the diamond, not the dollar store trinket he can pick up anytime. So yes, silence creates mystery. It makes him lean in closer. It makes him wonder what's on your mind. It makes him realize that you are not predictable, not ordinary, not replaceable. And the moment a man feels that mystery, he's hooked. He's addicted. Because mystery is the spark that reignites desire, and silence is the flame that keeps it burning. Rule number 60, silence is the door to transformation. Ladies, silence is not just about him, it's about you. It's not just about what he feels when you go quiet. It's about who you become in that quiet. Because silence, when you embrace it, is the doorway to your transformation. It's the passage from who you were, when you were desperate for his attention, to who you are, when you discover your own power. It's the bridge between brokenness and strength, between confusion and clarity, between begging for love and standing in your worth. See, when you're caught in the noise of a dysfunctional relationship, you can't grow. You're too busy reacting. You're too busy trying to fix him, fix the relationship, fix the mess. And in all that chaos, you lose sight of yourself. You lose your voice, your dreams, your joy. You forget what it feels like to just breathe without worrying about who's calling, who's lying, who's leaving. But when you step into silence, suddenly the noise fades, And in that silence, you hear something you've been missing. You hear you. Silence gives you back to yourself. It's in those moments of quiet that you start to realize how far you've drifted from the woman you were meant to be. It's in those nights when your phone stays silent that you remember how strong you can be without him. It's in those mornings when you stop waiting for his good morning text that you rediscover how beautiful it feels to wake up and set the tone of your own day. Silence becomes the environment where transformation happens because it forces you to stop pouring into him and start pouring into yourself. And let's be real, transformation is not easy. Transformation hurts. It feels like loss because in many ways it is. You're losing old patterns. You're losing the habit of chasing. You're losing the version of yourself that settled for less. And loss always feels uncomfortable. But what you're gaining is so much greater. You're gaining self-respect. You're gaining strength. You're gaining the ability to look in the mirror and love the woman staring back at you. And that kind of transformation is only possible when you give yourself the space of silence to do the work. Now, here's the powerful thing. When you transform in silence, people notice. Men notice. The same man who thought you'd always be there starts to see a different woman. The silence unsettles him at first, but then your growth shocks him. Because silence isn't just the absence of your words, it's the presence of your evolution. He looks at you and realizes you are no longer the same. You're not crying like you used to. You're not begging like you used to. You're not waiting around for his crumbs like you used to. You've grown wings in the silence, and now you're flying. And that transformation terrifies him because he knows he can't reach you the way he once did. But more important than him noticing is you noticing. Because silence is when you begin to see yourself differently. You begin to realize you're not as weak as you thought. You're not as dependent as you believed. You're not as broken as you felt. You're stronger, wiser, and more capable than you gave yourself credit for. Silence strips away the illusion that you needed him to survive, and it reveals the truth. You already had everything you needed inside you. Ladies, silence is the cocoon. And just like a caterpillar, you enter that cocoon feeling low, crawling, limited. But inside the cocoon, inside the silence, something miraculous happens. You change, you shade old layers. You rebuild yourself from the inside out. And when you emerge, you don't crawl anymore, you soar. That's what silence does. It turns pain into power, heartbreak into healing, and confusion into clarity. So don't fear the silence, don't resist it, don't rush to fill it. Embrace it. Because silence is not the end of your story. It's the beginning of a new chapter. It's the door you walk through to become the woman you were always meant to be. And when you step through that door, you won't just have transformed for yourself. You'll have redefined what love looks like in your life. You'll no longer accept halfway love, broken promises, or bare minimum effort. You'll know your worth so deeply that silence won't just be your refuge, it'll be your standard. Silence is the door to transformation, ladies, and when you walk through it, you never walk back the same. Ladies, listen to me. You've sat here and you've heard about the 6 rules of silence. You've felt the weight of what it means when a woman finally stops begging, stops explaining, stops chasing, and chooses quiet strength instead. And I need you to understand something. Deep silence is not emptiness. Silence is not surrender. Silence is strategy. Silence is healing. Silence is power. Silence is the mirror, the mystery, the new standard, the cocoon where you transform into everything you were born to be. You've given enough of yourself to people who couldn't even see your worth. You've spoken enough words to ears that refuse to listen. You've cried enough tears over someone who didn't deserve the ocean of your heart. And now it's time to stop wasting breath on noise and start breathing in your own peace. Time to stop running after men who don't value you and start running toward your purpose. Time to let silence be the loudest statement you'll ever make. Because here's the truth. When a woman learns to master her silence, she becomes unforgettable. she becomes untouchable. She becomes the kind of woman a man fears losing, the kind of woman he can't stop thinking about, the kind of woman he can't quit no matter how hard he tries. But more than that, when a woman learns to master her silence, she becomes unstoppable in her own life. So tonight, walk out of here with your head high, your heart steady, and your silence sharpened like a sword. Use it with wisdom, use it with grace, and never again forget you are the prize, you are the standard, and your silence is the proof. Now go out there and live like it.